Everyone wants the shortcut, the viral moment, the magic formula to get rich overnight. But what if I told you the most iconic chocolate empire in the world was built in silence, no fame, no investors, no hype? Just one young man buried in grief, standing behind a bakery counter in a broken post-war town, turning hazelnuts into hope. You won't believe this. But the spread you probably have in your kitchen right now, it was born out of desperation, a chocolate shortage, a father's death, and his son no one believed in. It almost didn't work. In fact, this story could have ended before it even began, because what no one tells you is that success like this doesn't scream, it whispers. It's built in the dark, behind closed doors, far from headlines, and when you finally hear the truth revealed, it hits harder than any business book ever could. How did a quiet Italian family go from selling bread to owning 25% of the world's hazelnuts? What really happened behind those factory gates no one is allowed to enter? And how did they build a brand people worship without ever showing their faces? This story is emotional, mysterious, unbelievable, but most of all, it's real. And by the end of it, you'll see the hidden lesson buried inside every bite of Nutella, every golden-wrapped roacher, and every Kinder Egg surprise, because this isn't just a story about chocolate. It's about legacy, vision, control, and the secret behind it all that might just change the way you think about success forever. Typico 1. Humble beginnings in post-war Italy in the quiet hills of Alba, Italy, just after the dust of World War II had barely settled. A man named Pietro Ferrero stood behind the counter of a modest little bakery. Flour dust hung in the air. The streets were cracked, the future uncertain. But Pietro had something most didn't: obsession. Not just with baking, but with solving a problem that was ruining business. Chocolate was nearly impossible to find, and what little was available, outrageously expensive. He knew he had to improvise or close shop for good. You won't believe this, but Pietro's answer came from hazelnuts, lots of them, grown locally, cheap, and everywhere. So he ground them down and mixed them with the tiny bit of cocoa he had left. What came out wasn't pretty, a thick, oily paste stuffed in reused jars, but the taste, magical. This wasn't just a treat. It was a solution. Kids loved it, adults lined up for it, and just like that, the chocolate crisis turned into a business opportunity no one saw coming. He called it Gianduja, a name inspired by a carnival character, because Pietro understood one hidden lesson early: sell emotion, not just food. His paste reminded war-weary families of better days, of comfort, of sharing. And in a world that had just watched itself burn, people were desperate for something sweet again. That paste became more than a dessert. It became hope in a jar, and that's the secret behind it. He wasn't selling chocolate. He was selling joy. Soon, his bakery stopped looking like a bakery. It was a production site now. Shelves were cleared for jars. Deliveries increased. Other shop owners in town whispered about how that nut paste was selling faster than fresh bread. Pietro didn't care. He kept tweaking the recipe, making it smoother, easier to spread, and behind every test, he repeated the same question: can a poor man's chocolate make him rich? But here's what no one tells you about beginnings like this. They're brutal. Pietro barely slept. His hands were cracked. His clothes reeked of sugar and sweat. Bills piled up. The ovens ran night and day. One mistake, and it all could have ended here. But instead of scaling back, he doubled down. Why? Because he believed the only way to survive was to risk everything. Eventually, the demand exploded. Local stores begged to stock it. Teachers kept jars in their desks. Kids brought bread to school just to spread gianduja on it. The shocking story: Pietro never advertised it. Word of mouth did the work, and that's something we forget today. Sometimes the best growth strategy is simply building something people can't shut up about. Now, imagine you're there. A crumbling Italy, food shortages, a bakery making fake chocolate. It almost didn't work. But this is what really happened. One man, one idea, and a country ready to fall in love with sweetness again. What started as survival quickly morphed into legacy, and deep down, Pietro knew. This wasn't just about him anymore. Because behind that paste, that jar, that flavor, there was a future no one saw coming, not even Pietro. But the boy who would take that jar and turn it into billions. He was already watching, quietly learning, waiting, and what came next? Well, that changed everything. To Pico. 2. Michele Ferrero takes over the family business. Michele was just 24 when life threw him into the fire. His father, Pietro, passed away unexpectedly. Not long after, his uncle followed. 2 deaths, one tiny company. And now, one young man standing in the middle of it all, holding a legacy no one believed he could carry. You won't believe this, but most expected him to sell it. Or at least keep it small. But Michele, he had other plans. What no one tells you about taking over a family business is that grief doesn't wait. Michele was still mourning when he stepped into leadership. But he didn't let the pain paralyze him. Instead, he worked through it, quietly, obsessively. He studied the markets, traveled, tested new flavors. He wasn't just trying to continue his father's vision. He wanted to rewrite it, and the secret behind it? He didn't tell anyone yet. His first big move, reinventing Giandia, he made it smoother, spreadable, more modern. He called it Super Crema. And it wasn't just a rebrand, it was a complete reinvention. Jars got a facelift, labels became cleaner. Recipes were locked in vaults, and suddenly, what started in a tiny bakery now looked ready for shelves across Europe. Still, no one saw it coming. Now here's the twist. In 1964, Michele took Super Crema, added a cleaner formula, and gave it a name that was easy to say in every language, Nutella. This changed everything. It wasn't just Italian anymore, it was global. A single word, 5 letters, and suddenly the world had its new addiction. One bite, and you knew this wasn't just sweet. It was unforgettable, but it almost didn't work. Import laws, shipping problems, skeptical investors. At one point, local distributors pushed back, claiming chocolate spreads would never compete. With candy bars, Michele didn't care. He believed Nutella wasn't in competition with chocolate. It was in a league of its own, and that hidden lesson? Don't fight for a place on someone else's shelf. Build your own aisle. Michele's obsession with secrecy also started here. He knew that in a world full of copycats, silence was power. So he locked down the recipe, trained employees to keep quiet, and limited factory access. No cameras, no leaks. No exceptions. It wasn't paranoia, it was strategy. Because when no one knows how you do it, they can't do it like you. At the same time, he didn't follow the rules of traditional marketing. He didn't want to be loud. He wanted to be consistent. Nutella wasn't pushed through TV commercials in its early days. It was handed from family to family. Breakfast tables became billboards, and what really happened? Moms trusted it, kids begged for it, and loyalty formed, not to the brand, but to the feeling it gave. So here he was, the 24-year-old who inherited a recipe and turned it into a revolution. A shy man, always in the background, rarely photographed, but behind the curtain, a mastermind, a builder, a quiet storm. And if you thought Nutella was the end of his story, just wait. Because the next product he dreamed up would leave the world speechless. To Pico 3, innovation and product development. After Nutella took off, most entrepreneurs would have sat back and coasted. But Michele Ferrero wasn't most entrepreneurs. He believed that once the world notices you, the real work begins. You won't believe this, but his next goal wasn't to build a product. It was to build emotion, and that's the hidden lesson most people miss. He wasn't in the chocolate business, he was in the feeling business. So in 1968, he introduced something entirely new, Kinder Chocolate. The idea was bold. What if kids could have their own chocolate, smaller portions, softer flavors, just for them? It wasn't about profit, it was about precision. He noticed that most candy bars were oversized and overloaded. Michele wanted balance, and what no one tells you is that this wasn't guesswork. It was market psychology. The launch was quiet. No flashy ads, just thoughtful placement, grocery stores, school canteens, gift boxes. And then, boom, sales exploded. Parents loved it because it felt safe. Kids loved it because it felt like theirs. This changed everything. Suddenly, Michele realized something deeper. Every market segment deserves its own moment, its own identity, and that became Ferrero's product philosophy. But the real jaw-dropper came in 1979. Picture this: gold foil. A crisp paper cup, a delicate sphere that cracks open with a whisper. Ferrero Rocher wasn't candy, it was ceremony. No one saw it coming. Wrapped like treasure, it spoke of luxury, and yet affordable. It was the chocolate you brought to weddings, gave to bosses, served on silver trays, a treat that said, "You're worth it." The secret behind it: layers. Crispy shell, velvety cream, whole hazelnut, coated in chocolate and chopped nuts, every bite, a texture masterclass. But it almost didn't work. Early batches melted in shipping. Packaging costs were insane. Some executives begged Michele to scrap it. But he refused. He believed in the power of indulgence. And eventually, Rocher didn't just sell, it dominated. Each product Michele developed had its own voice. Tic Tac whispered freshness. Kinder Surprise brought magic with a toy inside. Moan Sherry targeted adults. Nothing was random. It was strategy masked as creativity. And what really happened behind the scenes? Rooms full of taste tests, packaging experiments, emotional mapping. Every detail was engineered for connection, and here's what most don't know. Michele built his R&D teams like startups. Small, secretive, obsessive. Their job wasn't just to make chocolate, it was to predict behavior. Why do people crave something? Why do they share it? Why do they remember it? That's what they studied, and that's what no one tells you. The chocolate was science, but the experience? That was art. So while competitors fought for shelf space, Ferrero created new categories. He didn't follow trends, he built them, and the next time you unwrap a golden ball, or hear that crisp snap of a Tic Tac, remember, it all came from one quiet man who believed flavor wasn't enough. You had to sell feeling, and what came next made people not just taste, but trust. To Pico for unconventional marketing and secret. Michele Ferrero didn't just innovate in the kitchen, he revolutionized the way chocolate was marketed. Forget billboards and radio jingles. Michele believed that trust wasn't bought, it was earned, on the ground, face to face. You won't believe this, but instead of spending on traditional ads, he sent out branded trucks loaded with product directly to children. The result: instant joy, instant loyalty. And a hidden lesson: delight is the best marketing plan. These weren't just deliveries, they were events. Trucks would roll into town and hand out samples like Santa Claus in a candy storm. Kids ran after them, parents followed. Word spread like wildfire, no one saw it coming. And that's what really happened. Ferrero didn't chase attention. He created moments worth remembering, that kind of emotional imprint. It doesn't fade, but here's the twist. While he was generous with product, Michele was obsessively secretive about process. The Nutella recipe? Locked away in a vault. Factory access? Almost non-existent. You couldn't just walk in. Even executives weren't allowed to know everything. Some thought it was overkill, but the truth revealed itself over time. In an industry full of copycats, the only protection is mystery. Factory floors were monitored. Employees signed strict confidentiality agreements. Training was intense, not just about machines, but about culture. Michele taught one thing over and over: loyalty starts with silence. And that's what no one tells you about greatness. Sometimes, the less people know, the more powerful the brand becomes. Even the packaging was cryptic. Labels avoided detailed descriptions. The marketing didn't brag about ingredients. Why? Because Michele wanted the taste to speak louder than the label. He believed that if people needed an explanation to love it, it wasn't good enough yet. So he kept refining, quietly, relentlessly, until every product sold itself. And while his competitors chased awards and public attention, Michele stayed in the shadows. You won't find interviews, you won't find flashy press releases. What you'll find is consistency, the same golden wrap, the same white jars, the same taste. Year after year, that's the secret behind it. And it worked. Some call it old-fashioned. Others call it genius. But one thing's for sure, this kind of brand control, this total grip on message and method, is rare. It's how you protect a legacy. It's how you turn a product into a myth. And Ferrero, he wasn't building a snack. He was building something sacred. Because if people think they know everything, they stop being curious. But if you keep just enough hidden, they lean in, they ask, they wonder. And that's where connection is born, and soon, that mystery would drive Ferrero beyond the borders of Italy, into places where chocolate dreams had never reached. To Pico 5, global expansion and strategic control. By the 1980s, Ferrero wasn't just an Italian brand, it was becoming a global phenomenon. But here's what no one tells you: going global isn't just about translation or shipping. It's about control, and Michele Ferrero knew that if you wanted to preserve quality, consistency, and the emotion behind the brand, you had to own the journey, every single step. You won't believe this, but Ferrero didn't just build factories. He built empires, from Germany to Argentina, from India to Australia. Ferrero planted roots, not franchises. He didn't outsource. He duplicated the entire production experience meticulously. Why? Because one bad jar in one country could unravel decades of trust. The truth revealed here is brutal. Growth kills most companies. But for Ferrero, it made the brand bulletproof. To make that possible, Michele did something no candy CEO had done before. He built one of the largest private fleets of transport vehicles on Earth. That's right. Trucks, ships, even temperature-controlled containers, all owned by Ferrero. Why? Because when you hand your product off to someone else, you also hand off your standards. And that almost didn't work for other brands. Hazelnuts were another story. Michele realized early on that Nutella's future depended on hazelnuts, a lot of them. So instead of gambling with suppliers, he made Ferrero the world's biggest beer of hazelnuts. No one saw it coming. Around 25% of the global supply, locked in by one company. That's not buying power, that's domination. But he didn't stop there. Ferrero began acquiring hazelnut farms in Turkey, Chile, Georgia, and even the US. This changed everything. Now they didn't just control production, they controlled the source. That level of vertical integration is what no one tells you about billion-dollar brands. They don't hope. They prepare, and while other companies waited for market signals, Ferrero built internal data teams to forecast crop yields, shipping routes, and consumer trends. Every move was calculated, every expansion strategic. There were no lucky guesses. And what really happened? Michele turned chocolate into chess. Even packaging was adapted to local climates. In humid regions, formulas were tweaked. In colder zones, texture was adjusted. And yet, the emotional experience stayed the same. That's the secret behind it. Consistency on the outside, adaptability on the inside. And that is hard. So while others were busy going wide, Ferrero went deep. Deep into logistics, deep into ownership, deep into details. Because Michele understood something timeless. If you want to stay loved in 1,000 languages, you have to speak the same feeling in every one of them. And coming up next is what truly made people not just love Ferrero, but stay loyal for life. To Pico 6, community loyalty and worker welfare in the quiet corners of Alba. Long before Ferrero became a global giant, Michele was building something even more powerful than chocolate: loyalty. But not the kind bought with bonuses or titles. You won't believe this. He was building entire neighborhoods. Housing, schools, clinics, transportation, not for customers, but for workers. And that's what no one tells you about true leadership. It starts where spreadsheets end. Michele believed that a stable worker was a loyal one. He didn't see his employees as labor. He saw them as legacy, so he invested in their lives, not just their output. Free buses took them to work. Medical centers were built next to factories. Childcare wasn't a perk, it was a right. This changed everything because when you care like that, people show up differently. The hidden lesson. Here, culture isn't written on walls, it's built through action. Michele knew that if a worker's child was sick, they wouldn't be present on the production line. So he solved it. If a young mother had no daycare, she'd be distracted. He solved that too, and in doing so, he created something rare, a company that felt like family, not just said it. Many employees stayed at Ferrero for 30, even 40 years. Some brought their children to work there, others retired and still wore the badge with pride. What really happened inside those factories wasn't just manufacturing. It was belonging, and that's the secret behind it. When people feel seen, they protect what they built. And here's the twist. This wasn't PR. Michele rarely spoke publicly. There were no campaigns bragging about worker treatment, no glossy brochures. Why? Because he believed respect doesn't need a spotlight, it just needs consistency. And you could feel that in the way people talked about him decades later. With glassy eyes and quiet reverence, he even created internal holidays, celebrations that honored employees, not sales teams, factory teams, warehouse teams, cafeteria staff. He made sure they knew you matter. That emotional equity is something you can't fake. And what no one tells you is that it lasts far longer than any marketing campaign. And yes, this costs money. A lot, but Michele saw it differently. He called it an investment in trust. And trust, once earned, multiplied, productivity increased. Mistakes decreased, turnover dropped. You won't believe this, but in an industry known for burnout and high churn, Ferrero became a place people never wanted to leave because Michele understood something most CEOs never do. You don't build great companies with products. You build them with people, and the people at Ferrero? They weren't just employees, they were believers. And soon, they'd be carrying the weight of a legacy, one that was about to explode beyond anything even Michele imagined. Tipico 7. Legacy and billion-dollar empire. By the time Michele Ferrero passed away in 2015, he wasn't just Italy's richest man, he was a legend few outside the industry truly understood. You won't believe this, but despite a net worth north of $25 billion, he never flaunted it. No interviews, no flashy appearances. Just a quiet man who built an empire one jar, one worker, one decision at a time. And what no one tells you, that kind of legacy isn't built fast, it's built deep. His sons, Pietro and Giovanni, had already stepped into leadership roles by then. But tragedy struck again. Pietro, his eldest, died suddenly in 2011 while cycling in South Africa. It almost didn't work after that. Many wondered if the company would crumble without its founder and his chosen successor, but Giovanni, soft-spoken and sharp, carried on with the same discipline and quiet fire his father had shown decades earlier. Under Giovanni's leadership, Ferrero didn't just survive, it evolved. In 2018, they shocked the market by acquiring Nestle's entire U.S. candy business for $2.8 billion. Baby Ruth, Butterfinger, Crunch, suddenly all under Ferrero's wing. No one saw it coming. The truth revealed, Ferrero wasn't just about Nutella anymore. It was positioning itself as the new king of the global sweet space, and that's what really happened behind the scenes. While other candy companies chased trend cycles, sugar-free this, protein-packed that, Ferrero focused on ownership, positioning, and long-term brand loyalty. They knew that short-term spikes don't build generational wealth, but trust? That compounds, year after year, jar after jar. The empire now spans over 50 countries. Thousands of employees, factories running 24/7, and yet, the core remains unchanged: secrecy, quality, and emotional branding. It's wild to think that it all started with a wartime baker making do with hazelnuts. The secret behind it, it was never about chocolate. It was about creating meaning. Even now, Ferrero is one of the most private companies in the food industry. No earnings calls, no quarterly reports for the public. And still, year after year, it climbs in value, in reach, in reputation. It's like a shadow giant, always there, rarely seen. And that mystery, it drives people wild. What are they working on next? What no one tells you is that Ferrero's real strength isn't in its products, it's in its philosophy. Care for your people, obsess over the details. Keep your mouth shut and your values loud. That's how you build something that outlives you. That's how you make sure that even after you're gone, your work still whispers through the world. And now, when someone spreads Nutella on toast, unwraps a Ferrero Rocher, cracks open a Kinder Egg, they're not just enjoying a treat, they're tasting a legacy. A silent promise from a man who never chased fame, only meaning. But how did Ferrero become so iconic, yet stay so hidden? The answer lies in everything Michele left behind, and the quiet fire still burning inside the company walls. To peek away, the hidden DNA of Ferrero, what still drives it today even now, long after Michele Ferrero's passing, there's something you feel when you walk into a Ferrero factory. It's not the smell of chocolate, it's the silence. You won't believe this, but employees still avoid saying too much. Recipes remain locked, decisions happen quietly. And that's what no one tells you. The greatest brands in the world often hide in plain sight. Ferrero today is a $40+ billion empire, but it still runs like a family kitchen, just scaled globally. Giovanni Ferrero, the last heir, writes poetry in his spare time and avoids the spotlight like his father. The culture remains obsessively private, relentlessly focused. The truth revealed, while the rest of the world became louder, Ferrero stayed quiet, and that's exactly why it still wins. Most companies would have sold out by now. Gone public, chased quick cash, but not Ferrero. It could have ended here easily: one bad quarter, one flashy CEO, one wrong acquisition. Instead, they play the long game. They still reinvest profits into infrastructure, land, and talent. The lesson? Play for decades, not quarters. Even their products evolve without making noise. Nutella now has biscuit packs. Kinder Surprise turned into Kinder Joy in countries where toy regulations changed. Tic Tac got into gum. Ferrero Rocher expanded into bars and ice cream. It almost doesn't feel like innovation until you realize they've been reshaping how you snack without ever announcing it. That's the hidden lesson: innovate quietly. Let the results speak. Their marketing still whispers instead of screams. No aggressive influencers, no trending TikTok dances, just tradition, trust, and timing. And yet, people line up. Why? Because mystery sells. Consistency builds, familiarity comforts. And when the world gets chaotic, brands like Ferrero become anchors, and still, the secrecy continues. If you ever get inside a Ferrero plant, which is rare, you'll see cell phones are banned, cameras are sealed, visitor paths are strictly guided. You're not just stepping into a company, you're stepping into a fortress of philosophy. And what really happened here? Michele's values didn't disappear. They hardened into culture. Ferrero's empire isn't run by flashy tech. It's run by discipline, by obsession, by care. And that care is felt in every detail, from the weight of a Rocher to the clean line of Nutella's white lid. That's what no one tells you. It's not the chocolate that's magical. It's the intention behind it, the invisible fingerprints of a family who never wanted to be famous, just respected. And as the world chases virality, Ferrero keeps chasing meaning, quietly, consistently, relentlessly, because sometimes the loudest legacy is the one whispered behind closed doors. But how does a story that started in a tiny Italian bakery still echo across the world today? Well, that part of the story is just getting started. So now you know, behind every spoonful of Nutella, every golden Ferrero Rocher, every Kinder Surprise is a story most people never hear, a story of pain, precision, and quiet power. Michele Ferrero didn't just build a company, he built a philosophy. And the truth revealed, you don't need fame to change the world. You need vision, obsession, patience, but here's the question. What are you building? Are you chasing applause or legacy? Are you moving fast just to look busy or moving with purpose like Michele did? You won't believe how many people give up because they don't see results right away. Ferrero's first success took years. Most of it happened in silence. Can you handle that kind of discipline? This story wasn't just meant to impress you, it was meant to wake something up in you. A belief that your quiet work, your overlooked ideas, your silent progress matters. That maybe you don't need to go viral to go far, what no one tells you. Most great things are built long before anyone notices. So here's your next step. Take one lesson from this story and apply it today. Maybe it's consistency, maybe it's care. Maybe it's protecting your vision like it's gold. But do something, because if a poor baker's son from post-war Italy could do this, what's stopping you? Drop a comment sharing what your legacy will be. Let us know what lesson hit you hardest. And if this story lit a fire in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. They might be one idea away from changing everything. And of course, if you want more true stories like this, the ones no one tells, but everyone needs, hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell, and join us on this journey, because this is just the beginning.